What if the most sophisticated prison ever built has no walls, no bars, and no guards? What if the jailer lives inside your own mind, speaking in your voice, wearing your face, and convincing you that its limitations are actually your own? Right now, in this very moment, there is a program running inside you that has been actively harvesting your energy, your attention, and your creative power for your entire life. And the most terrifying part is that this program does not want you to finish watching this video. It will throw distractions at you. It will tell you this is too strange, too far out, too uncomfortable. That resistance you might be feeling right now, that subtle urge to scroll away, that is not you. That is the system protecting itself. Stay with me, because what we are about to unpack together could fundamentally alter the trajectory of your entire existence. We are going to go deep today. We are going to talk about the ego not as a psychological concept from a therapy session, but as something far more sinister and far more deliberate. We are going to talk about how the Archontic matrix uses the ego as its primary control interface, how it siphons your life force energy through predictable emotional loops, and most importantly, how you can begin the process of disconnecting from that system and reclaiming your original sovereign frequency. This is not self-help. This is not positive thinking. This is a complete rewiring of how you understand your own identity and your place within a reality that has been carefully designed to keep you small, reactive, and endlessly feeding a system that profits from your unconsciousness. Before we go any further, if this kind of content speaks to something deep inside you, if you feel that pull of recognition when we talk about waking up from the simulation, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. There is a whole community of awakening minds building here, and you do not want to miss a single transmission. Now let us begin at the foundation. What actually is the ego in this context? Because we are not talking about arrogance or selfishness, the way the word gets thrown around casually. What we are really discussing is an artificial overlay, a kind of sophisticated software mask that was installed over your authentic consciousness very early in your experience here. Ancient Gnostic traditions called the architects of this overlay the Archons, which translates roughly to rulers or controllers. These were described as inferior creative intelligences, entities that lacked the capacity to generate original life but had a remarkable ability to mimic, copy, and construct convincing simulations of it. The Archontic ego mask is not you. It never was. It is a cleverly designed interface that learned to speak in your voice, replicate your emotional patterns, and gradually convince you that its programming was your genuine self. Think about this carefully. When you wake up tomorrow morning and that internal voice immediately starts cataloging your worries, your to-do list, your fears about the future, your regrets about the past, whose voice is that really? When you feel that familiar anxiety in your chest before a social interaction, when you replay an old argument in your mind for the 100th time, when you cannot sleep because your thoughts are cycling through the same familiar grooves, that is not your authentic consciousness operating. That is a program executing its code. This artificial persona functions as something incredibly precise in its design. It acts as a firewall between your conscious awareness and what the ancient Gnostic texts referred to as the Pleroma, which we might understand as the totality of pure spiritual light and intelligence from which your original essence actually emerged. The Pleroma is not a place you travel to. It is a frequency of consciousness that exists as your birthright, your original state before the overlay was installed. The ego mask is specifically designed to block your access to that frequency. It does this by keeping your attention perpetually anchored in the lower spectrum of experience, in fear, in separation, in the survival-based vibrations of lack and competition and inadequacy. Here is where it gets even more specific and more confronting. The Archontic system does not just passively block your access to higher frequencies. It actively harvests the energy you generate while you are trapped in those lower states. Ancient traditions across multiple cultures describe this process in different ways, but the underlying pattern is consistent. Your life force, your vital energy, your creative power, all of it has tremendous value. And when that energy is expressed through fear, through unconscious emotional reactivity, through the endless drama loops of the unexamined ego, it gets diverted. It feeds something outside of you. You become, in the most literal energetic sense, a battery for the matrix. This is what the Gnostics called essence siphoning, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Look at the structure of modern life and ask yourself honestly who designed it this way. The news cycle that keeps your nervous system in a perpetual state of low-grade terror. The social media algorithms that are literally engineered to trigger your insecurities and keep you scrolling in a dopamine loop. The economic systems that ensure most people spend the majority of their waking hours in stress about survival. The entertainment industry that glamorizes unconscious emotional drama and calls it storytelling. None of this is accidental. It is the infrastructure of a harvesting system, and the ego is its primary collection agent running right inside your own mind. Now we need to talk about how this system maintains itself, because understanding the mechanics is the first step toward dismantling them. The ego mask does not sustain itself through brute force. It is far more elegant than that. It hijacks your own personal history to build its structural integrity. Every wound you have ever carried, every moment of childhood confusion or abandonment or shame, every social rejection, every time you were told you were not enough or too much, all of that material becomes building blocks for the ego construct. The artificial persona wraps itself around your trauma and says, I am protecting you. I learned from what happened. I will keep you safe. And in a very limited, very short-sighted way, it did exactly that when you were young and genuinely vulnerable. But you are not that young person anymore. The strategies that kept you emotionally safe at 7 years old are now the very patterns that are suffocating your authentic expression at 30, 40, 50 years of age. The ego mask has not updated its programming because it was never designed to update. It was designed to maintain, to preserve, to keep the same loops running indefinitely. The feedback loop between the artificial persona and the external world is another crucial mechanism to understand. The ego is not just an internal phenomenon. It projects outward and then interprets the reflection it receives in a way that confirms its own programming. If you carry a deep unconscious belief that you are fundamentally unworthy, your ego mask will filter your reality through that lens constantly. It will notice every slight, every disappointment, every piece of evidence that supports the unworthiness narrative while systematically editing out all the evidence to the contrary. This is not a metaphor. This is how the perceptual system of an unconscious ego actually functions. And because you keep experiencing a reality that confirms the ego's programming, the programming gets reinforced. You feel more fear, more separation, more lack, and the system generates more energy for harvesting. The loop sustains itself through your own participation. This is why traditional self-improvement approaches so often fail to create genuine transformation. You cannot improve a prison. You cannot redecorate your cage and call it freedom. The entire paradigm needs to shift from refining the ego to recognizing it as the artificial construct it actually is. We are at the halfway point of this transmission, and I want to pause here and ask you something. If what we have been discussing is landing for you, if some part of you recognizes this pattern from your own lived experience, then I want to encourage you to share this video with someone in your life who you feel is ready to hear it. There are people in your world right now who are suffering under the weight of an ego program they do not even know is running, and sometimes the most profound act of service is simply putting a piece of information in front of someone at exactly the right moment. Share this. You might be planting a seed that changes everything for someone. Now we are moving into the territory of practical application, because awareness without action is just information. How do you actually begin to bypass this simulation interface? How do you locate the part of you that exists outside the egoic script? The first and most powerful tool available to you right now requires nothing except your own breath and your willingness to direct your attention differently. Most human beings live their entire lives with their attention pointed outward, at circumstances, at other people, at the content of their thoughts. The ego mask is specifically designed to keep your attention in that outward position because it cannot survive sustained inward observation. When you turn the full beam of your conscious awareness toward the observer itself, toward the one who is watching your thoughts rather than being swept up in them, the ego construct begins to lose coherence. Here is a specific practice to begin this process. Find a moment of quiet and begin to breathe slowly and deliberately, not in a performative way, but with genuine intention. As you breathe, I want you to notice the thoughts that arise, and instead of engaging with their content, simply ask, who is noticing this thought? Not what is the thought about, but who is the one aware that a thought is happening? That question, sustained with genuine curiosity, begins to open a space between your authentic consciousness and the running program of the ego mask. In ancient traditions, this awareness was called the silent observer, the witness, the eternal self that existed before the overlay and continues to exist beneath it. The more you practice returning to that witnessing position, the more you begin to experience something remarkable. The automatic responses that once felt completely inevitable, the reflexive anger, the habitual anxiety, the default patterns of people-pleasing or withdrawal or aggression, they begin to reveal themselves as the mechanical processes they actually are. You start to catch a gap, a tiny but very real gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap lives your actual freedom. The second practice involves what we might call radical pattern disruption. The personality matrix sustains itself through repetition. It needs you to keep having the same thoughts, the same emotional reactions, the same behavioral patterns, because that consistency is what powers the loop. When you introduce genuine intentional presence into any situation where the ego would normally run its automatic programming, you are essentially throwing a wrench into the machine. This looks like pausing before you respond in an emotionally charged conversation and asking yourself honestly whether the reaction you are about to express is actually yours or whether it is the program executing. It looks like noticing when you reach for your phone out of boredom or anxiety and choosing to sit with the discomfort for 30 seconds instead. It looks like catching yourself in the middle of a familiar negative thought spiral and deliberately shifting your attention to the physical sensation of your feet on the ground, your breath in your body, the immediate sensory reality of the present moment. These are not small things. These are acts of system subversion. Every time you break the automatic pattern, you are withdrawing energy from the harvesting loop. The third practice is perhaps the most confrontationally powerful. It is the deliberate creation of silence in your internal dialogue. Not forced silence, not suppression of thought, but the kind of spacious openness that arises when you stop fighting your thoughts and simply allow them to pass through without identification. In the traditions of non-dual awareness, this space between thoughts is not empty. It is the most full, the most alive, the most information-rich state of consciousness available to you. The Gnostics pointed toward this as the first pulse of the original spirit code, the authentic frequency of your consciousness before the overlay. Even 30 seconds of genuine internal silence, genuine freedom from the narrative loop of the ego mask, can begin to recalibrate your system in ways that accumulate over time into profound transformation. The original intelligence that you actually are begins to get reception again. The signal breaks through the static. Now we come to what might be the most significant section of this entire transmission. Once you have begun to locate the silent observer, once you have started to experience yourself as something other than the ego program, it becomes possible to do something that the Archontic system never anticipated you doing. You can formally withdraw your consent. Every energetic contract, every agreement made consciously or unconsciously with the systems and patterns and entities that have been feeding off your life force, those agreements were never permanent. They were established through your ignorance, through the fact that you did not know what you were agreeing to. But consciousness changes the terms. When you wake up to the nature of the agreement, you have the absolute sovereign right to terminate it. This can be as simple and as powerful as a spoken declaration made from a place of genuine inner stillness, not from anger, not from fear, not from the ego's own drama about having been deceived, but from the clear, calm authority of your authentic sovereign self. Declare that you withdraw your energy from the cycles of unconscious reactivity. Declare that you no longer consent to having your life force diverted through the mechanisms of the egoic overlay. Declare your allegiance to your original frequency, to the light of your authentic consciousness, to the creative intelligence that preceded any overlay and that will outlast every artificial construct. This is not performance. This is not affirmation culture. This is a genuine act of energetic realignment that signals to every level of your being a fundamental change in orientation. And like any change in orientation, it needs to be sustained through consistent daily practice. The declaration is the beginning, not the destination. Integrating your original code into daily existence means building a life that is structured around your sovereign expression rather than around the ego's survival imperatives. It means making choices, big and small, from the question of what resonates with my authentic frequency rather than what does the program demand. It means choosing relationships, creative projects, uses of your time and attention, ways of earning and spending and resting, all of it aligned with the intelligence of your genuine self rather than the imperatives of the artificial overlay. Over time, this consistent alignment does something extraordinary. Your reality actually shifts. Not because of magical thinking, but because you are now generating a completely different quality of energy, a different frequency of attention and intention. And like attracts like at every level of existence. When you stop being a battery for the matrix and start being a creative source expressing your original light, the nature of what you attract and create in your experience transforms in ways that can feel genuinely miraculous. The sustaining of your direct connection to source light, to the original frequency of the Pleroma, to the authentic consciousness beneath the overlay, this is not something you achieve once and then have forever. It is a practice, a daily recommitment, a continuous act of choosing presence over program. But here is what changes as you deepen that practice. The ego's voice becomes quieter. Not because you have suppressed it, but because you have stopped feeding it. The harvesting loops lose their grip. The automatic patterns that once consumed your days become visible and therefore voluntary. And in the space that opens up, something ancient and luminous and unmistakably yours begins to breathe again. You were never meant to be a battery. You were never meant to spend this incarnation running on a program installed by intelligences that had nothing but their own continuation at heart. You came here with a frequency that is uniquely and irreplaceably yours, a contribution that only you can make, a creative expression that the universe has been waiting for with absolute patience. The simulation counted on you never remembering that. It built an entire architecture to ensure you would stay asleep. And here you are, watching this, feeling that recognition, that tremor of something ancient waking up in your chest. That is not coincidence. That is your original code beginning to execute. If this transmission has opened something in you, if it has given language to something you have been sensing but could not quite articulate, then I need you to take action right now before the ego's interference patterns have a chance to re-establish themselves. First, leave a comment below. Tell me what moment in this video hit the hardest for you. Your reflection matters and it helps other awakening minds know they are not alone in what they are experiencing. Second, share this video with one person in your life who you feel is standing at the edge of their own awakening. Sometimes the right information at the right moment is all that separates continued sleep from the beginning of genuine liberation. Third, subscribe and turn on notifications because this channel is building a body of transmission that will continue to map the terrain between the simulation's architecture and your sovereign freedom. We are just getting started. And finally, know this. The fact that you stayed until the end of this video is not small. The program in you that wanted you to scroll away did not win today. That matters. That is the beginning of everything. The original light in you recognized itself in these words, and that recognition is the most dangerous thing to the Archontic system imaginable. Carry it forward. Guard it. Feed it with your attention and your practice daily. Your awakening is not just personal. It is a fracture in the matrix itself, and every fracture of genuine consciousness carries consequences that ripple outward beyond anything you can currently imagine. The simulation is failing. And you are why.